Welcome everyone to another iceberg. Today, we'll be taking a look at the Mass Effect iceberg. I know it's not the most relevant franchise at the moment, because sadly the last installment was in 2016, if you don't count the remastered collection, but it's one of my favorite video game franchises, so I thought, whatever, I'll make an iceberg for it. I don't really have anything else to add, so I hope you enjoy the video.
You're up and let's... What's with the Volus?
Oh, pizza delivery guy. I got the munchies.
Double pepperoni. Who's going to pay the bill?
Space Hamster. This is a recurring joke in the Mass Effect series that began in Mass Effect 2. In that game, you could buy a pet hamster that'll live in Shepard's cabin in the Normandy, where he'll do hamster stuff like look at you, walk around, and probably poop eventually. It makes its return in Mass Effect 3, where it's revealed that after the events of Mass Effect 2, it somehow got loose in the engineering deck. If you catch it, it'll return to its place in your cabin. And later in the game, you can actually take a husk head and show it to the hamster. And the husk head just screams at the hamster, probably forever traumatizing the poor thing. Also in the Citadel DLC, aka the single best DLC in any video game, the Shepard lookalike attempts to kill the hamster, but thankfully fails. Another space hamster can be found in Mass Effect Andromeda, where it can be taken in as a pet. This reoccurring joke is actually a reference to the Baldur's Gate series, as in that series a character carries around a mini giant space hamster in their inventory. N7 Day. November 7th is basically May the 4th for Mass Effect fans. It's known as N7 Day. Get it? N7 for Mass Effect, November 7th. Anyways, this day was first celebrated, I guess you could say, in 2012, and has continued ever since. Now, because Mass Effect isn't as big as, say, Star Wars or Marvel or DC, BioWare don't really make any major announcements on N7 Day. It's mostly a day for Mass Effect fans to post their fan art, cosplays, fan fictions, and or memories of the franchise. Though BioWare has made some announcements on that day, including Mass Effect Legendary Edition and Mass Effect 4 or 5. I'll get to that in a second. Blasto. Blasto is a running gag in the Mass Effect franchise. He's an in-universe fictional character that's a Hanar who starred in countless films, and by countless, I mean at least 8 of them. There's Requiem for a Reaper, Blasto the Jellyfish Stings, which is a weird title because jellyfish is an in-universe slur against Hanars, Blasto Saves Christmas, Blasto 6, Partners in Crime, Blasto 7, Blasto Goes to War, and Blasto 8, Blasto Cures the Genophage. Although there's actually 2 Blasto 8s, the other one being Blasto 8, the jellyfish always stings twice. So maybe the Genophage one got turned into that one? I don't know. Point is, Blasto has appeared in a lot of films. This joke originates from Mass Effect writer Patrick Weeks, who created the character in a thread on the official Mass Effect forums called Your Ideal ME2 Squad. Fans took a liking to the character, so they decided to put him in the games as a joke. There was even a commercial created by BioWare to promote the in-universe product, Blasto's cereal. The last thing I want to mention here is that I lied. There's not 2 Blasto 8s. There's 3 of them. The third one was created by the people who colonized the Andromeda Galaxy in Mass Effect Andromeda, and they called it Blasto 8, The Biotic Awakens. They also created another Blasto film, titled Blasto vs. the Scourge. So I guess that's like the unofficial Blasto 9. This whole thing kind of reminds me about how there's technically 2 different Paranormal Activity 2s. Everyone hates the Mako. In the original Mass Effect, you drive around the big old truck known as the Mako in a lot of sections. It plays a core part in Mass Effect 1's gameplay, and it sucks. Like, pretty much everyone hates this thing. Not that its design's bad, it's a good design. The issue is that its controls are really, really bad, especially on console. It also tips over a lot, and aiming it can be a bit of a challenge. BioWare is actually well aware of people's hatred for the Mako, and has even made jokes about it in other Mass Effect games, with Liara even stating in Mass Effect 2 that the air car being driven by Shepard is still better than the Mako. Shepard VI. In Mass Effect 2, you can find a dude selling VIs of Shepard during Thane's loyalty mission, and in the next game, you can actually find one of these VIs, modeled off of Shepard, in the refugee docks of the Citadel. Outside of having one little funny interaction with them, the Shepard VIs don't play any role in Mass Effect 3's story. Though what's neat is that the dialogue of these VIs will actually change in Mass Effect 3 depending on if Shepard is more Renegade or Paragon. Morinth. If I were to ask you to name off of one companion for the Mass Effect series, you'd probably say like Liara, Garrus, Rex, Tali, Miranda, Legion, or Jack or something like that. There's very few who would say Morinth. And there's a decent chance that some Mass Effect players don't even know about her. Or at least know that she's actually a potential squad mate. Morinth is one of Samara's 3 daughters. She appears in Samara's loyalty mission, where you're given the choice to kill her or Samara. If for whatever reason you decide to kill Samara, Morinth will actually then pretend to be her dead mother and accompany you on missions. This is why some players might not even know that she's a potential squad mate, because who would kill Samara? I guess you'd kill her if you're doing an evil playthrough, but even then I doubt many sided with Morinth. Morinth is actually even romanceable. Kinda. Morinth wants to bang Shepard because she's never seen anyone like them before. And if you do bang her, you die, because Morinth has that genetic disorder that kills people when joining mines. Not sure if she did this with the intention of killing Shepard though, as she suggests that Shepard's strong will keep them from dying. But I mean, she could have just been lying. Though she does send Shepard an email in Mass Effect 3 saying that she's thankful that they took a chance on them and hope that they don't die. So, I don't know, maybe she just liked Shepard. Uranus. In Mass Effect 2, if Shepard sends a probe to the planet Uranus, you get this funny interaction.
Really, Commander? Probing Uranus.
Mass Effect 4. So a 4th Mass Effect game has always been on the minds of fans of the franchise. While the original trilogy was planned out as a trilogy, that didn't stop fans from speculating on whether or not Mass Effect 4 would happen. And if it did happen, would it continue the story? Would it be a prequel? Would it be a reboot? A spin-off? From 2012 to 2015, those were the questions in the minds of every single Mass Effect fan. And in 2016, the 4th game actually happened, that being Mass Effect Andromeda, which was very controversial to say the least. I think it's okay personally, but anyways, while that was technically the 4th main installment of the series, fans don't really like calling this game Mass Effect 4 because it doesn't actually continue the story of Mass Effect. It's a soft reboot, spin-off, set in another galaxy. And so, after Andromeda released, fans went back to wondering if a true Mass Effect 4 would ever happen. And, it might actually be happening now. On November 7th, 2020, it was confirmed that a new Mass Effect game was in development, and in December of that year, an announcement trailer was released that hinted that it would be a sequel to the original trilogy, even revealing that this new game would use the Unreal Engine like the OG trilogy, instead of the Frostbite engine that was used for Andromeda. So yeah, this could very well be the Mass Effect 4 that's been speculated about since 2012. Elevator Ride. In the original Mass Effect, the elevator in the Citadel was used to allow the game to load in and process different areas, as the game was pretty massive. Basically, the elevator served as a loading screen, where you and 2 of your companions would stand in place and occasionally talk to each other or hear news reports relating to the missions that you've recently completed. BioWare would actually go on to make fun of these sections in Mass Effect 3.
So, anyone want to talk about their people's history?
Nope.
So I'm the only one who misses when we used to chat in the elevators back on the Citadel.
Yep.
So disappointed.
When it came time to remaster the original Mass Effect, the elevator rides were no longer needed, as the game could load in everything much faster. However, some fans liked these elevator rides because of the fun banter they could get. So BioWare decided to keep the elevator sequences, but allowed players to skip them if they wanted to after a certain period of time. Space cows. In the Mass Effect franchise, there's a certain alien creature that are a bit of a meme in the Mass Effect community. These are, of course, the space cows. They look more like okapis, but whatever. They're featured primarily in Mass Effect 1, where they can be found walking around on various planets in herds eating grass. If you kill any of them via gunfire or just ramming into them with a Mako, the other space cows will just ignore you. Like they don't actually care that you just killed one of their own. It's very weird. They returned in the Mass Effect 2 DLC Firewalker Pack, where you can then use the Hammerhead to just eradicate them. The Hammerhead's VI will even say, defenseless herbivores are no match for guided missiles, which is a fair statement. Finally, there's the space cow that probably is responsible for the entire species becoming a meme. That is, the shifty-looking cow. An individual space cow that chills out by a deposit of gold on the planet Antarum. This cow will follow Shepard around, and if they get close enough, it will begin to steal their credits. And if you kill it, it'll just respawn. According to lead technical designer Dusty Everman, the shifty-looking cow owes its existence to the game's lead designer, Preston Wadamayninik. Upon seeing concept art for the space cow, he said, "You can't trust any animal that can milk itself." Live action show. In November 2021, it was reported that Amazon was negotiating the rights to produce a live-action Mass Effect series for Amazon Prime. Sadly, there hasn't been any updates since that report. However, Henry Cavill did say in December 2021 that he would love to be part of a Mass Effect series, so maybe he could be in it. As of now, nothing is known about this show. I originally thought this show wouldn't happen, and I guess it could still not happen, but it seems like live-action TV shows adapted from video games is like the new big trend. I mean, The Last of Us, Halo, and Fallout either happened or are happening. So hey, maybe the Mass Effect show will actually happen. Mass Effect 3's controversial ending. Mass Effect 3's ending is probably one of the most controversial endings in video game history, if not the most controversial. When the game was released, fans thought the ending was a letdown for the following reasons. The ending made a lot of character choices seem inconsequential, there wasn't really any sense of closure, lore contradictions, narrative inconsistencies, no final boss fight, plot holes, etc. This led to a fan campaign known as Retake Mass Effect, which was a bunch of fans who demanded that BioWare go back and quote-unquote fix the ending. They also did a charity drive which gathered $80,000 to the organization Child's Play, so that's pretty cool. But the controversy didn't stop there, as one fan made a complaint to the Federal Trade Commission and argued that BioWare did not deliver on the promise of the game. The Better Business Bureau even supported these accusations, though the UK Advertising Standards Authority came in and said, no, they're innocent, what are you talking about? All of this would lead to BioWare creating the free DLC called Extended Cut, which included new scenes to help quote-unquote fix the ending. It even added a new ending to the game, where you could refuse all the options, and the Reapers kill everyone. An epilogue sequence was also added with this DLC. It seems that nowadays, most people have calmed down about the ending of Mass Effect 3, but I mean, there's still fans who don't like it. I personally am just very indifferent to it. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it's certainly not the best. I still love Mass Effect 3. I don't think the ending ruins the game by any means. Shepard can live. It's a common misconception that Shepard dies at the end of Mass Effect 3. While yes, Shepard does die in most of the game's endings, there is one ending in which Shepard is shown to have survived. In order for Shepard to live, you need to have your military strength extremely high, and do the Destroy the Reapers ending. If this is done, there will be a very brief cutscene showing Shepard alive underneath a pile of rubble. Also, the squad mate that Shepard was the closest with will also hesitate to put Shepard's name on the memorial wall, indicating that they think that they're alive. If BioWare decides to make the next Mass Effect game a sequel to the original trilogy, there's an extremely high chance that this is the ending they're going to follow up on. Tali's face. In yet another Mass Effect 3 controversy, one that I actually feel strongly about, is Tali's appearance. Tali is one of my favorite Mass Effect characters. I really like her. And if you know Tali, you'll know that you never see her face in any of the Mass Effect games. Except for a photograph in Mass Effect 3. Yeah, one of the things they decided to do with Tali in Mass Effect 3 was to reveal what the Quarian looked like underneath the helmet, with Tali being the example shown. So what does she look like? She's human. Well, okay, no, she's not human. Well, I mean, except that she actually is. Obviously, in universe, she's not human, but this photo was taken from a real stock photo of a real-life model. It's just edited a bit to make her face look a little bit alien. This caused controversy because fans thought it was a really weird choice to make the Quarian's face look pretty much like a human, especially since all the other alien races in the game are so alien-looking. Even the humanoid ones that you can romance, they look more like aliens than humans. Personally, I would have preferred her to look like this. This is fan art from the DeviantArt user Callisto Lin. Years later in Mass Effect Legendary Edition, this photo would be edited by BioWare, retconning what the Quarians look like underneath their helmets. And I mean, it's better. The white eyes is a neat touch, but again, she just kind of looks too human to me. The last thing that I'll mention is that Tali's face was originally going to be revealed way earlier in the game, at the very end of the questline on Rannoch, but this sequence was scrapped during development. You decide if Garrus and Tali get together. Romance plays a decently sized role in the Mass Effect series, with players getting really invested in the characters due to their personalities and stories. That being said, only Shepard seems to be doing any of the dating. All of your companions, outside of Jacob because they decide to make him cheat on Shepard in between games, don't show any interest in dating anyone. That is, unless you don't date Tali or Garrus. If you don't date either of them by Mass Effect 3, they'll have fallen in love and begin dating. This is the only time something like this ever happens in the entire franchise. I really like this idea, and I wish that other characters did the same thing. Like, I don't know, maybe if you don't date Kaidan, he ends up with Liara, or maybe if you don't date Thane, he'll end up with Kelly or something. Like, I don't know, I'm spitballing ideas. What do the Asari look like? So if somebody were to ask you, what do Asari look like, you'll probably just say, play the game. And, that's fair. I mean, what we see in the game is obviously what they look like. Except that might not be true. In Mass Effect 2, you can find a human, a Solarian, and a Turian watching an Asari dancer during a bachelor party. And they have this interaction.
I can understand why I might find Asari attractive, but how can they be attractive to humans too? They look just like Solarians.
What? They look exactly like us. I'm not seeing the Solarian thing at all. At all.
You're both wrong. Asari look just like Blue Turians. Look at the head fringe.
Wait, you don't think they're like mind controlling us to see them as attractive, do you?
Please be quiet. You're going to ruin Asari for me. And there aren't many Turian women on Ilium.
This has led some people to believe that the Asari that we see in the franchise just look like that because we're viewing them from a human perspective, and that Asari look different to each species. Some have even come to the conclusion that the Asari are manipulating other species into finding them attractive so that they can expand their race. But in regards to the theory that Asari look different to each species, I hate to break it to all the theorists out there, but this isn't true. For starters, Liara can wear armor made for humans, which means that Asari have to have a body like a human. And yes, you could argue that their faces could be different to each species, and sure, that could be true, if it wasn't for Mass Effect 3, where we can see Asari statues built by Asari, and they look like Asari, and everyone agrees that they look like Asari. So, there you go. This Mass Effect 2 scene was either just a joke or theory bait, just to get people thinking. From Ashes. In yet another Mass Effect 3 controversy, the story DLC From Ashes, which introduces players to the character Javik, gives players a new costume for all their squad mates, 2 new missions, and a new weapon, was released on March 6th, 2012 for $10. So what's the problem? Well, Mass Effect 3 was released on March 6th, 2012. You get the problem now, don't you? Fans and critics alike were pretty angry that a $10 expansion was released on the exact day the game was released. Basically, Day 1 DLC. There were many people who claimed that the content of the DLC was actually in the game, and that the $10 was just to unlock the content already on the game's disc, or the digital version of the game. And while aspects of this might be true, EA responded to these accusations, saying that around 600 megabytes of game content was given to the player upon buying the DLC. And because of this, technically not everything was on the disc. Sadly, several BioWare employees actually came out and defended this DLC, with staff member Christina Norman saying to judge the DLC on its quality and not the timing of its release. Refund guy. In the original Mass Effect, in the Citadel, you can find a human desperately trying to refund a product from a store run by a Turian. But he can't get a refund because he doesn't have a proof of purchase. If you come back here later, you'll see him trying to get a refund again by showing the Turian a bank statement saying that he purchased something from him, but again, it doesn't work. And if you come back even later, you'll see the Turian refund to somebody else, while the human continues to beg for a refund. In Mass Effect 2, you can find him again, trying to get a refund from an Omni gel converter in a warehouse from a Salarian. He claims that he was told that this is where he'd get his new Omni gel converter, but the Salarian won't give him one because he doesn't have a service order. Eventually, he realizes that this was just a scam, and he can't get a refund here. He also reveals that he's been trying to get this refund for 2 years. Finally, in Mass Effect 3, you can find him yet again trying to get a refund. This time from a Salarian running a store. He tried to set up an appointment to get the refund, like he was told to, but for whatever reason, it doesn't seem like his appointment request was registered. And it's revealed here that he's now trying to get a refund for a toaster oven. Here you can actually interact with him, and either side with him or the Salarian. If you side with him, he'll finally be refunded the 15 credits he's been so desperately wanting back. Temporary squad mates. In all 4 main Mass Effect games, there are 26 squad mates. Well, kinda. You see, in several Mass Effect games, you can have squad members for very specific missions, and after that mission is over, they leave your squad for good. These are known as temporary squad mates. Here's a list of every single one of them. In Mass Effect 3's Citadel DLC, you can have Rex, Miranda, Grunt, Samara, Jack, Zaid, Kasumi, and Jacob be temporary squad mates in either the main storyline for the Citadel DLC or the Armax Arsenal Arena Combat Simulator. In the Mass Effect 2 DLC, Arrival, Amanda Kenson can become a temporary squad mate for a few minutes. In Mass Effect 3's Omega DLC, Aria and Kandros can both be temporary squad mates. In Mass Effect 2's opening mission, Wilson becomes a temporary squad mate, and as this Reddit post says, he's very trustworthy. In Mass Effect 2's Lair the Shadow Broker DLC, Liara serves as a temporary squad mate for a bit. In the opening Mass Effect 3 mission, Anderson serves as a temporary squad mate. And finally, in Mass Effect 1, there's Jenkins, who's one of your first squad mates. He does not last very long. Mass Effect Andromeda's awful launch. Part of the reason why Mass Effect Andromeda has a very mixed reception in the Mass Effect community is because the game was pretty much broken when it was released. The game was riddled with bugs, glitches, and errors, long load times, poor lip syncing, poor animations, etc. It was a mess. You can still find countless videos online going over all of these bugs. A month after the game's release in April 2016, BioWare released a massive patch that fixed a lot of the bugs and poor animations. 2 more pretty big patches were released in May 2016 and July 2016. Though despite all 3 of these massive patches, there are still some glitches in the game and some weird animations, but for the most part, the game-breaking stuff is gone. As for why the game ended up the way it did, it's mostly because of 3 reasons. The first was that Andromeda lost its lead writer, senior editor, and several other key devs while the game was in development. The second reason is because they were making the game on the Frostbite engine, and they had to recreate everything from the ground up, as the other 3 games were built on the Unreal Engine. And finally, BioWare really wanted to push the boundaries of the Frostbite engine, especially when it came to character animations.
Cover me!
You ever wonder where they go?
I never really thought about it.
Ow! Hold your breath. I can't swim.
Get the M490 Blackstorm heavy weapon plus Terminus armor when you pre-order Mass Effect 2 at GameStop. Power to the players. Rated M for mature. Available only on Xbox 360 and PC.
Mass Effect Paragon Lost. Released in December 2012, Mass Effect Paragon Lost is an animated film produced by BioWare and animated by Production IG. The film takes place in the year 2185 and follows Vega as he leads Delta Squad, not that Delta Squad, against the Collectors in order to protect Fel Prime. While Vega is the only character from the original trilogy to be a main character in the film, there are still small appearances made by other game characters, like Anderson, Liara, and Hackett. While the film was released in December 2012, it did actually get a very limited theatrical release in November 2012. As for Paragon Lost's reception, it was very mixed. I haven't seen it myself, so I can't speak for its quality, but it seems there's a reason why most Mass Effect fans don't really talk about this film. Mars Rover. In May 2021, former Mass Effect designer Richard Boisvert revealed on the Mass Effect subreddit that he had added in an Easter egg to Mass Effect 3 that had actually gone undiscovered for nearly a decade. He drew up a map and explained that at the very beginning of the Mars questline, if you walk through the solar panel array in a certain way, you'll find a Mars rover. Very cool to see that there's Easter eggs in Mass Effect that we still haven't found yet. Pinnacle Station Remastered cancelled. Mass Effect Legendary Edition serves as a collection of the original 3 games with all of their single-player DLC. However, there's actually one DLC that wasn't included in the remaster, that being Pinnacle Station from the original Mass Effect. This wasn't the greatest story DLC in the series, but it still had its fans, as not only did it give players some new missions and combat situations, but also new locations to visit. So why wasn't it in the remaster? Well, BioWare actually intended for this DLC to be in the game. However, it had to be scrapped because BioWare lost the source code for it. The archived original source code for Pinnacle Station was discovered to be corrupted, and that backups made by Demiurge Studios were all unusable. It was stated by Mac Walters, that it would have taken 6 months to recreate the code with the team that they'd been given to do the remaster, and sadly, they just didn't have the time or manpower to do it. Dark Energy Ending. It was theorized that Mass Effect 3's ending was originally going to have something to do with dark energy and dark matter, as they're mentioned, along with decaying suns, quite a lot in Mass Effect 2. Theories about how this dark energy ending would have gone down stem from a supposed script leak from the original Mass Effect 3, and how in that draft, the Reapers weren't harvesting life to preserve new life, but instead, harvesting life in order to stop people from using the Mass Effect fields, and by extension, dark energy. They wanted this because apparently by using Mass Effect fields and biotics, dark energy is produced, and that's accelerating the death of the universe. This would have led to 2 different outcomes for the game. The first is that you stop the Reapers, but then have to figure out a way to solve the dark energy problem. Or you just let the Reapers wipe out humanity and have the Crucible shoot out human DNA into space to purify the dark energy. However, according to Mass Effect writer Drew Karpyshyn, during a Reddit AMA, stated, "There are a lot of things in Mass Effect 1 and Mass Effect 2 that we planted as seeds in case we wanted to build on them later on. However, as the project evolves, sometimes you have to go in different directions, and you don't always get to make those seeds grow." The Asari don't have eyebrows. So this is just a fun little detail that I never realized until researching for this video. It's pretty common knowledge that the Asari don't have any hair on their body at all, but a lot of them do seem to have eyebrows. Well, these aren't actually eyebrows, they're just markings that some Asari have that look like eyebrows, but aren't. Shepard's cancelled trial. Prior to the release of Mass Effect 3, it was stated by various articles and interviews with BioWare dev members that Mass Effect 3 was going to begin with Shepard on trial for their actions in the Arrival DLC, and that the Reaper invasion of Earth would begin in the middle of that trial. Despite these interviews and articles, no trial sequence appeared in either the demo for the game or the final release, and in September 2011, one of the writers for Mass Effect 3, Mac Walters, even confirmed that the trial happened prior to the events of Mass Effect 3. It seems that the trial sequence was scrapped and replaced with Shepard being on house arrest. Jessica Chobot controversy. The character Diana Allers in Mass Effect 3 has a bit of controversy around her. Although I guess not really because of the character, but instead her voice actress, Jessica Chobot. Jessica Chobot is a media figure who at the time of Mass Effect 3's release had a blog on IGN. This led some people to criticize BioWare for having journalists being a little too close to the project, especially since Jessica Chobot had previously previewed Mass Effect 3 on G4 TV. She also claimed that she was simply just an on-screen personality and didn't consider herself to be a journalist. Basically, because she occasionally appeared on G4 and had a blog on IGN, people were worried that IGN and/or G4 would give Mass Effect 3 great reviews purely because she was part of the project. When the game released, IGN would give Mass Effect 3 a 9.5 out of 10, and G4 would give it a 5 out of 5 stars. But at the same time, GameSpot gave it a 9, the official Xbox magazine gave it a 10, 1UP gave it an A, and all 4 versions of the game got an 85 or above on Metacritic. So it seems very unlikely that they gave it good reviews just because Jessica Chobot played a minor character in the game. Novels. Like with many major video game franchises, Mass Effect has its fair share of novels. The first novel, Mass Effect Revelation, released in May 2007 and written by Drew Karpyshyn, who went on to write 2 more novels, this book takes place in 2165, 18 years before the events of the first game, and tells the story of Anderson and Saren investigating an attack by some mercenaries on a research center on the planet Sidon. This book actually exists in-universe, as you can purchase it in Mass Effect 2. In July 2008, a second novel was released, titled Mass Effect Ascension, which takes place a few months after the events of the original game, and tells the story of a woman named Gillian Grayson being hunted down by Cerberus. Throughout her journey, she'd be helped by a scientist named Callie Sanders, who was created for Mass Effect Revelation, and would return in 2 more novels before finally making her in-game debut in Mass Effect 3. In July 2010, the final novel written by Drew Karpyshyn would release. Titled Mass Effect Retribution, this novel takes place shortly after Mass Effect 2, and it tells the story of Callie teaming up with Anderson to find Gillian Grayson's father, Paul Grayson, who's been captured and being experimented on by Cerberus. Released in January 2012 and written by William C. Dietz, Mass Effect Deception was released and tells the story of Gillian Grayson now hunting down the Elusive Man after her father had been murdered by Cerberus. I'll go into more detail about this book later, as if you know about this book, you probably know why it has to have its own entry. A few years later, 3 more novels would be released that all tied in with Mass Effect Andromeda. The first novel, Mass Effect Andromeda Nexus Uprising, was released in March 2017, and as the name suggests, tells the backstory to the uprising that occurred in the Nexus. This book was written by Jason M. Hugh and K.C. Alexander. In November 2017, a second novel would be released, titled Mass Effect Andromeda Initiation, and was written by N.K. Jemisin and Mac Walters. This book serves as a backstory for Cora Harper and actually takes place in the Milky Way galaxy, as Cora is sent on a mission to locate some stolen data that can be used against the Andromeda Initiative. This book is currently the final novel released that takes place around the time of the original Mass Effect trilogy. And finally, released in November 2018, Mass Effect Andromeda Annihilation was released. Written by Catherine M. Valente, this book tells the story of the Quarians' Ark's journey to the Andromeda Galaxy, and how the crew of the ship had to combat a deadly pathogen that had been released on board, and find the culprit responsible for it. And as of right now, Annihilation is the final Mass Effect novel to be released, though there'll probably be more of them released when the next Mass Effect game comes out. Legion Dancing. In Mass Effect 2, if you wait around in Legion's room for a little bit, Legion will eventually start doing the robot. Dragon Age Connections. In Mass Effect 2 and Mass Effect 3, you can purchase armors called the Blood Dragon Armor. These armors are very clearly a reference to the Dragon Age franchise, a series also created and developed by BioWare. And the Blood Dragon armor is actually canon, and not just some fun non-canon outfit you can wear, as the Elusive Man apparently had it in his possession and sent it over to Shepard. And that's where all the Dragon Age references stop, right? Oh no. You see, there's a very popular fan theory that states that the Mass Effect and Dragon Age franchises are actually canon to each other. How is this possible? Well, because of the variety of different Easter eggs. For example, in Mass Effect 2, you can find a statue of a Darkspawn ogre. In Dragon Age Inquisition, you can find Krogan heads mounted on walls in 4 different areas. In Mass Effect Andromeda, you can find a Nug in a pod on the Meridian Station. In Dragon Age Inquisition, you can find a note written by a healer who writes very similar to how Mordin talks. And probably the biggest connection, outside of Magecraft and Biotic Powers being similar, is that you can find the moon that's featured in the Dragon Age games in the original Mass Effect as a planet called Klendagon. You can even land on one of its moons called Pressrop. And oh yeah, 3 characters from Dragon Age 2 sent Ryder messages in Andromeda, though admittedly that one's probably just a non-canon Easter egg. Mass Effect Andromeda 2. While it was never announced, it was pretty obvious that Mass Effect Andromeda was going to be the beginning of a new trilogy of games. However, with the very mixed reception to the original game and its horrible launch, it seems that plans for a sequel were scrapped. Though at the same time, there is evidence supporting the idea that Andromeda's storyline hasn't been completely abandoned by BioWare, and it might influence the plot of the next Mass Effect game. The biggest piece of evidence for this is from Michael Gamble, the project director of the next Mass Effect game, who has also worked on other installments of the series. He's tweeted out hints indicating that Andromeda's storyline may continue in the next game, along with plot lines from the original game. Fans have also claimed that in the few pieces of concept art for the game that have been released, you can actually see pieces of Andromeda lore, like Cora's helmet, and even an Angara. At this point, all we can do is wait and see. Though the trailer we've been given for the next game does show what looks to be a destroyed Reaper covered in snow, so that kinda implies that the game will take place in the Milky Way galaxy. I have no idea at this point. Maybe the next Mass Effect game will both be Mass Effect 4 and Andromeda 2. Which, if that's the case, oh boy, that's a lot to live up to. Jaal's updated sexuality. So prior to the release of Mass Effect Andromeda, Jaal was planned to be bisexual. However, for whatever reason, when the game released, he was straight, and so only could romance Sarah Ryder. However, 3 months after the release of the game, a patch was released for the game that added in the scrapped gay Jaal romance option. This was done because Scott Ryder didn't have a same-sex squad mate available as a romance option. So yeah, Jaal started out as bi, then was straight, and finally bi again. Wild stuff. Multiplayer. In Mass Effect 3, the world was introduced to the concept of Mass Effect multiplayer. Unlike most multiplayers, Mass Effect 3's multiplayer was exclusively co-op, meaning that there was no PvP mode. In this mode, you take on Reapers, Cerberus, Geth, and even Collectors on many different multiplayer maps. Also, by playing this mode, you'd be given rewards in Mass Effect 3 singleplayer. This mode is pretty much a survival mode, like COD Zombies, Gears of War's Horde mode, Halo's Firefight, and RIPD the video game, for all of, nobody played that. Although, unlike the examples I just gave, there's only 11 rounds to survive. No more, no less. There's also objectives players have to complete in order to pass the round. The rank limit for multiplayer is only level 20. However, you can actually level up each of the 6 classes in the game to level 20. As for the game's classes, there's Adept, Engineer, Infiltrator, Sentinel, Soldier, and Vanguard. While all of this sounds pretty neat, but what makes this multiplayer stand out is that for the first time, you can actually play as a character who's not human. Although wait, technically you can play as a Loki mech in the Arrival DLC, but that's a robot and Shepard's controlling that, so I guess it doesn't really count. But yes, you can play as a human, a Drell, a Turian, a Quarian, an Asari, a Geth, a robot, a Salarian, a Batarian, a Vorcha, a Krogan, and even a Volus and a Collector. Yeah, it turns out that after the events of Mass Effect 2 and the near extinction of their species, the few Collector survivors out there actually allied themselves with the Alliance to battle the Reapers. Surprisingly, multiplayer would return in Mass Effect Andromeda, and like last time, you can get rewards for the game's singleplayer. It's similar to Mass Effect 3's multiplayer, though with some differences. For example, it's a lot more heavy on the microtransactions, and instead of fighting Reapers and Cerberus, you fight the Ket, the Remnant, and some outlaws. Like with Mass Effect 3's multiplayer, you can also play as a bunch of species, ranging from human, Asari, Krogan, Turian, Salarian, Batarian, and Angaran. Finally, in terms of maps, Mass Effect 3 has a surprisingly large amount of maps, with 19 overall. Although at the same time, only 6 of them actually came with the game, the rest are DLC. While Andromeda only has 10 maps. Cancelled Andromeda DLC. Because of Mass Effect Andromeda's horrible launch and mixed initial reception, BioWare cancelled all their plans for story DLCs. One of the story DLCs would have been focused on Ryder and their crew discovering what happened to the Quarian Ark. This was even teased at the very end of the game. But yeah, sadly, this DLC would never be announced, and it would be cancelled, if it even existed in the first place, as both BioWare and EA have actually claimed that no DLC was ever planned for Mass Effect Andromeda. Now, most people don't actually buy this, as Andromeda is the only RPG made by BioWare post Mass Effect 1 to not have a single story DLC. And before somebody says Anthem, that was an MMO. Though, in BioWare's defense here, outside of the Quarian Arc tease at the end of the base game, the only piece of evidence pointing to a Quarian Arc DLC was a Facebook post made by the company Sinclair Networks. And since that company has never actually existed, it's not a great piece of evidence. Cerberus in Andromeda. While there isn't a major Cerberus presence in the Andromeda Galaxy, you can discover two scientists part of Cerberus performing mind control experiments on the planet Kadara. Although technically they're no longer part of Cerberus, as not only has the organization been gone for like 600 years at this point, but before leaving to the Andromeda Galaxy, the Illusive Man actually fired both of these scientists for continuing their work on neural research, despite Miranda ordering them to stop. This is all learned in the mission Mind Games. Don't touch that. In Mass Effect 3, you can find a Salarian soldier working on a computer on the planet Surkesh. If you try to interact with his computer, he'll tell you to stop. But you can actually continue to try to touch his computer, which will really tick him off.
As I said, Commander, don't touch that. Again, I would ask you to refrain from touching that. Perhaps don't touch that means something different in your language. I would rather not refer this matter to the human embassy. Touch it all you want. You'll never find out what it does. Are humans really so deprived of stimulus that they must insist on touching everything? I'm afraid if you keep touching that, you risk a diplomatic incident. Further manipulation of that object is grounds for further admonishment. Really? You must stop touching that. Once more, the Solarian Union formally requests that you not touch that. Fine. If you are so enamored of that object, then I suggest you get your own feces analyzer. We've already been down that road. No more.
A similar Easter egg occurs in Mass Effect Andromeda on the planet Kadara, but this time with a Solarian worker.
Please, I'd rather you not touch that. Did you hear what I said? Hands off. Seriously? Someone says don't touch that, and the first thing you do is touch it. Am I not being clear enough? Stop touching that. It's killing you, isn't it? You gave up 600 years, came all the way to a new galaxy, and now you really want to know what that does. You're thinking, maybe a Thresher Maw will pop out if I just pushed hard enough. Maybe it's a 3D holo of the new Blasto vid. Blasto versus the Scourge. Go ahead. Touch it one more time. And then I'll let you in on the secret. Okay. One more to make sure you really want it. Right. So every time you push that button, there's a 50-50 chance a prisoner in the next room dies from electroshock. And yet you did it again. Good thing I'm kidding. It doesn't actually do anything. This is Kadara. Everything's busted.
Ashley and the Evil Dead. Honestly, I'm pretty embarrassed to admit this, but I didn't actually realize this before making this video. But yeah, Ashley Williams is a direct reference to the Evil Dead franchise, as Ashley Williams sounds pretty close to Ash Williams, the protagonist of the Evil Dead series, or at least most of them. And in the first game, while on Vimir, Ashley even mentions shooting things with her boomstick, a direct reference to what Ash Williams calls his shotgun in the third Evil Dead movie, Army of Darkness. Shout out to all 2 people who remember the Army of Darkness iOS game. Mass Effect Deception. So I briefly mentioned this novel, Mass Effect Deception, earlier in the video. At first glance, you might not think this book is anything that's special compared to the other Mass Effect novels. But here's the thing. Every single novel in the Mass Effect franchise is canon to the series, except Deception. Deception was originally canon when it was released, but since then has been deemed non-canon by BioWare. Why was this? Because fans hated it. Like, really hated it. Fans hated this novel for the massive amount of lore inconsistencies and continuity errors. Like I said, because of this, the book was retconned into being non-canon by BioWare, with BioWare staff member Chris Priestley even saying, quote, "The teams at Del Rey and BioWare would like to extend our sincerest apologies to the Mass Effect fans for any errors or oversights made in the recent novel Mass Effect Deception. We are currently working on a number of changes that will appear in future editions of the novel." And yes, you heard that right. The book would be edited and re-released at a future date, but with all of the canon-breaking elements removed. At least, that was the plan. This was announced in February 2012, a month after the original release. And it's been 11 years since then, and no updated version of the book has ever come out. So I'm guessing it's cancelled. As for the errors in the book, there's way too many of them for me to list, but I'll leave a link in the description to a 15-page Google Doc listing every single error in the book. The Amazon Echo. If you ask an Amazon Echo the question, "Does this unit have a soul?" it'll reply to you with, "Keelah Se'lai." This is a direct reference to Legion's death in Mass Effect 3, and of course, the question that began the Quarian and Geth War. 2001, A Space Odyssey. In Mass Effect 2, when EDI suggests you give her control of the ship in order to escape the Collectors, Joker responds by saying, "If you start seeking Daisy Bell, I'm done." This is in reference to HAL 9000 in the film and novel 2001, A Space Odyssey, as he sings the song Daisy Bell as he deactivates. And that scene is a reference to how the song Daisy Bell was the first song ever sung by a computer. Anyways, that's not the only Space Odyssey Easter egg in the Mass Effect franchise. Probably the biggest reference is in the mission Abandoned Research Station in Mass Effect 2, as the entire mission is a direct reference to the film, as both the plot of the film, the novel it's based on, and the mission are about an AI killing a bunch of humans in a spaceship because they're trying to turn it off. Comics. Just like with pretty much every single major sci-fi game franchise, Mass Effect has its fair share of comics over the years. Starting off was Mass Effect Redemption, released from January 2010 to April of the same year. Published by Dark Horse Comics and written by Mac Walters, Redemption serves as a prequel to Mass Effect 2 that focuses on Liara shortly after Shepard's disappearance at the beginning of the game. Or a temporary death, really. She also faces off against the Shadow Broker, and characters like Miranda and Farron make appearances throughout the story. In June 2010, a one-shot sequel mini-comic titled Mass Effect Incursion would release that serves as a direct connection between Redemption and Mass Effect 2. It takes place only a week before Mass Effect 2, and is about Aria battling Collectors on Omega, and was written by Mac Walters once again. Mac Walters would again write another one-shot titled Mass Effect Inquisition. Released in October 2010, this short story focuses on Captain Bailey investigating C-Sec corruption shortly after Mass Effect 2. The next 4-part miniseries ran from January 2011 to April the same year. This series is titled Mass Effect Evolution, and was written by both Mac Walters and John Jackson Miller. This story is set in the year 2157 during the First Contact War, and serves as an origin story for both the Illusive Man and Cerberus. It also delves into the past of Saren and General Williams, a character only mentioned in the original game. This story also reveals that the Illusive Man's real name is Jack Harper. Next was the one-shot Mass Effect Conviction, released in September 2011. It's set a few days after the Arrival DLC, and focuses on Vega having a confrontation with some Batarians. And once again, it was written by Mac Walters. Following that was Mass Effect Invasion, which was released from October 2011 to January 2012. Again, it was written by Mac Walters and John Jackson Miller. This series focuses on Aria battling Cerberus as they attempt to invade Omega shortly before the events of Mass Effect 3. Following this was Mass Effect Homeworlds, another 4-issue miniseries that ran from April to August 2012. This series was written by Mac Walters, Patrick Weeks, John Dombrow, Jeremy Barlow, and Sylvia Kita-Kati. This series is an anthology that focuses on Liara, Vega, Garrus, and Tali in between the events of Mass Effect 2 and 3. The next comic was a one-shot titled Mass Effect Blasto: Eternity is Forever. Written by Mac Walters, this comic is a comedy, telling a story about the in-universe movie character Blasto I mentioned in Tier 1. It was released in November 2012. Following this was another one-shot titled Mass Effect: He Who Laughs Best. Released in May 2013 and written by Mac Walters and Jeremy Barlow, this one-shot focuses on Joker's origin story. Next is the longest Mass Effect series by far, with 13 issues. Written by Mac Walters, Mass Effect Foundation is another anthology series that focuses on a variety of characters. Some old, like Rex, Ashley, Kasumi, Thane, Miranda, and Kaidan, and some new ones, like Maya Brooks, who connects all the issues, and would later serve as one of the antagonists of the Citadel DLC in Mass Effect 3. And finally, there's Mass Effect Discovery, which follows Kandros infiltrating the Andromeda Initiative. This series ran from May 2017 to October the same year, and was written by Jeremy Barlow and John Dombrow.
In the not-so-distant future, the galaxy stands on the brink of total annihilation. And the fate of humanity rests on the shoulders of a single man and his Valkyrie assault rifle.
Garrett, a little help over here.
Oh, yes. Sorry.
At least the N7 Valkyrie assault rifle and defender armor have your back. Get them when you pre-order Mass Effect 3 at GameStop. Power to the players. Rated M for mature.
You could save both Ashley and Kaidan. So this is probably the most well-known piece of cut content in the Mass Effect series. In the original game, there was going to be an option to save both Ashley and Kaidan instead of choosing to save only one of them. We know about this because of audio files that were found revealing this cut choice. And in this audio, you can hear mentions of a stunt that Shepard pulled off in order to save them. This was scrapped from Mass Effect 1 because it makes the game's biggest choice kinda meaningless, and it would complicate future installments, as BioWare would have to create storylines where both Ashley and Kaidan are alive, alongside storylines where one of them is dead. Dead Space armor. In Dead Space 3, you can unlock a suit in the game called the N7 suit, which is an obvious reference to Mass Effect. The only way to unlock this suit is to have a Mass Effect 3 save file on your console. As for the suit itself, it looks pretty much like the N7 armor in Mass Effect, though Carver has his own unique N7 suit, having a lot more red than black. Probably should have had this on the Dead Space iceberg, but oh well, it's here. Live action film. In 2007, there was a lot of talk about a potential Mass Effect film, and in May 2010, EA announced that Legendary Pictures and Warner Bros. Had purchased the rights to a Mass Effect film, and that several of the original game's producers would serve as producers for the film. By 2012, Morgan Davis Full was hired to be the film's writer, and then nothing happened. It wouldn't be until June 2021 where Mac Walters would reveal that the film was cancelled. According to him, the film never made it past the initial planning stage, due to Legendary and Warner Bros. Being unsure if they could tell the story of the original Mass Effect in only 2 hours. So then why would you buy the rights to make a Mass Effect film the first? Whatever, it doesn't matter. Anyways, the only thing we know about the film's plot, outside of it being an adaptation of the first game, was that Shepard would have been a guy. A lot of cut LGBT romances. In Mass Effect 2, Jack was originally going to be pansexual, meaning that she could be romanced by either male or female Shepard, and Jacob was originally supposed to be gay and only have a male romance option. These got so far into production that all of the scenes of their same-sex romances were actually animated. So why were they scrapped? Fox News. No, I'm not joking. You see, the original Mass Effect game got into some controversy with Fox News, with host Martha McCallum calling out Mass Effect for the more erotic scenes in the game. That, and the fact that you could have a lesbian relationship with Liara. Yes, I know Asari don't technically have a gender, I know, but nearly everything that mentions her uses female pronouns, so just whatever, I know. This controversy made EA tell BioWare to scrap these romance plots to avoid a potential boycott. Also, leaks for Mass Effect 2 revealed that Tali, Miranda, and Thane were all going to originally be bisexual. It seems that Miranda and Thane's lesbian and gay romances were cut earlier in development than Tali's, as you can actually see some remnants of Tali's same-sex romance in the final game. And finally, in Mass Effect 3, Vega was originally going to be bisexual and have a romance storyline in the game. This was revealed via some leftover voice files. Luna 23. In Mass Effect 1, you can find the Soviet lander, the Luna 23. This lander crashed on the moon in 1974, and because it crashed, its mission to return lunar dust samples was a failure. But the Soviet Union tried again with another lander named Luna 24, and this mission was a success. But yeah, anyways, you can actually find Luna 23 on the moon, and surprisingly, it hasn't been touched by anyone since its crash in 1974. Though you can interact with it and take some scrap from it. Also, the Luna 23 in the game looks absolutely nothing like it does in real life. As in real life, it looks far more like this. Plants vs. Zombies. In Mass Effect Andromeda, you can find a pea shooter plant plushie and a zombie mad scientist plushie in one of the beds in the Tempest. These, of course, are a direct reference to the Plants vs. Zombies series. I don't think it's ever mentioned whose bed this is, so we can only speculate who owns these plushies. My guess is Kahlo. Mass Effect Team Assault. So I've often wondered, what would a first-person Gears of War game look like? Anyways, Mass Effect Team Assault was a cancelled first-person shooter multiplayer game that served as the inspiration and basis for Mass Effect 3's multiplayer. Production on Team Assault began in 2010, shortly after the release of Mass Effect 2, and production on the game lasted about 4 months. Eventually, it would be scrapped, and assets created for the game would eventually find their way into Mass Effect 3's multiplayer. As for the gameplay of Team Assault, we don't really know all that much. All we have is some screenshots and brief clips that come from the documentary The Final Hours of Mass Effect 3. What we do know is that it would have featured both infantry and vehicle combat, with the Mako and Hammerhead from Mass Effect 1 and 2 returning. You would also be able to fly the Mantis gunship for the first time. And you'd be able to play as a variety of different species, such as a human, a Salarian, and an Asari. Team Assault would be released exclusively via digital stores, and would be similar to Battlefield 1943, rest in peace, in terms of gameplay and content. Mass Effect Infiltrator. Released in March 2012, Mass Effect Infiltrator was a smartphone Mass Effect game, and like with Bad Company's iOS game and Dead Space's iOS game, Infiltrator actually played like a Mass Effect game, only way more limited. The game was a third-person shooter with morality choices scattered throughout, and you'd have the option to purchase and upgrade weapons and abilities in a store using credits you got during gameplay. You could also hook up a controller to your phone and play the game using that. Unlike the mainline entries in the series, this game isn't open world, and instead, you play through 9 different levels. You play as a dude named Randall Esno, a Cerberus agent who goes rogue after discovering his advisor being experimented on by their boss, the Director. During his escape from the Cerberus space station called The Barn, he's helped by a Volus working with the Alliance, and he has to battle a giant mutant Krogan known only as X-1. After killing X-1, he's able to escape to a nearby world called LV-426. Yes, it's an alien reference. And then his advisor shows up and tries to kill him, as she's become a human-husk hybrid with the Director controlling her. You beat her up and eventually kill her if you chose a bunch of renegade options earlier in the game. Then Randall declares that he's going to kill the Director, and the game ends. And before you ask, no, this story was never followed up on, so Randall and the Director are still out there doing whatever, as far as we know. Though speaking of Randall, there is something weird about him that's never actually explained, or even brought up. He has the same scars that Shepard is given following their resurrection. So was Randall also brought back to life by Cerberus? Anyways, while Randall and the director's stories were never continued, there actually was a story expansion to Infiltrator in a free patch released in April 2012. Crazy that Infiltrator got a story expansion, but not Andromeda. Anyways, this expansion is only one level, where you play as an unnamed Turian who was captured by Randall and Cerberus in the very beginning of the main game. He's able to escape his cell because of the events of the main game, and you fight through the barn trying to escape. Only, unlike Randall, he doesn't actually escape. The level ends with the Turian being trapped in a room, where he's then executed by a turret. If you want to play this game, I'm sorry to say, but it's actually very hard to get, as the game was removed from the App Store in September 2015, and eventually the Google Play Store in April 2018. And because of this, the war asset you can earn in the game, yes, you can actually earn a unique war asset for Mass Effect 3 by playing this game, that being the Cerberus escapees, is no longer available to earn. Mass Effect Red Sand. Red Sand is a fan film released in October 2012, and unlike most fan films, this one actually has some talent from the original Mass Effect trilogy in it. Mark Meer, the voice of Male Shepard, stars in the film as Colonel John Grissom. The story of the fan film was set 35 years prior to the original game, and it tells the story of humanity discovering ancient Prothean ruins on Mars. This film was created by the students and faculty of the University of Advancing Technology in Arizona. Mass Effect Corsair. Corsair was a cancelled spin-off game that would have been focused on a Han Solo-inspired character. It was being developed for the Nintendo DS, and was being developed by the team responsible for Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood. It was supposed to be a first-person shooter influenced by Star Control and Wing Commander Privateer. You would have also been able to fly around your ship in space and have vehicle combat. Batarians would have also played a decently sized role in the game's plot. This game would ultimately be cancelled by EA for two reasons. The first is that they projected the game would only sell 50,000 copies, which wasn't enough in their eyes. And finally, because of the game's size, the game's cartridge would have costed EA $10.50 to produce, and since the game would have been sold for about $30, they didn't think they'd get their money back. After its cancellation, most of the team would be sent off to work on Mass Effect Infiltrator. Conrad Werner's sister. So throughout the original Mass Effect trilogy, you'll come across a dude named Conrad Werner, who is a very big fan of Shepard and the Spectre program. So much so that he attempts to be a Spectre, and you gotta convince him to calm down and stop it, because if you don't, he ends up dying in every single installment. He dies an especially brutal death in Mass Effect 2, falling off a bus and then hitting several cars, and then falling into a power turbine. Anyways, Conrad Werner is a fun little side character, but many don't actually know that his sister actually appears in Mass Effect Andromeda, and she's not a huge fan of her brother, or even her family for that matter, as she mentions that she traveled to the Andromeda Galaxy to escape her crazy family. Although I guess being a superfan stalker type runs in the Werner family, because despite her insisting that her brother is a crazy stalker for his obsession with Shepard, she's pretty obsessed with Sloane Kelly. Kasumi's Scrapped Loyalty Mission. If you look into Mass Effect 2's text files, you'll see that Kasumi's loyalty mission was going to be extremely different than the one we ended up getting. Her loyalty mission would have originally been about helping Kasumi stop a corporation known as the Nava Corp from using a bioweapon against the Alliance. This bioweapon would have been a virus that only the Nava Corp had the vaccine for. Mass Effect 2's Scrapped Squad Mates. So Mass Effect 2 had a lot of scrapped squad mates, and I mean a lot. Here's all of them. The scrapped concepts for squad mates include a malfunctioning Prothean hologram, a Han Solo-like smuggler with the enthusiasm of Luke Skywalker, a crazy Quarian king who's obsessed with killing Geth, an insane demolitions expert, a Quarian infiltrator who was inspired by Butch Cassidy, a stoner hippie Solarian hacker, a woman who specializes in stealing ships and hates men, an Asari Spectre, a 75-year-old non-sentient robot that Shepard discovers via mechanic, the most deadly killer in the galaxy, a socially awkward Batarian mechanic, a doctor who left his job after his loss of faith in humanity, and finally a Solarian assassin looking to avenge his ancestors who were parts of the League of One. Comet Dawnstar. In Mass Effect Andromeda, you can find a comet known as Dawnstar flying through space in the Helios cluster. Upon scanning it, you'll be given some platinum. This comet is a reference to the video game Jade Empire, another RPG created by BioWare. In that game, there's a character named Dawnstar, and this comet is rich in nephrite, which is a type of jade. Fans convinced BioWare to let them bang Garrus. When it came time to make Mass Effect 2, BioWare wanted to expand on the romance options in the game. So Tali, Thane, Miranda, Jacob, Jack, Kelly, and kinda Samara and Mornth were chosen to be romanceable. Mass Effect 2 writers weren't initially planning to have Garrus be romanceable. In fact, writer Drew Karpyshyn claimed that they were actually surprised by the massive demand to romance Garrus. Which, yes, there was a pretty big part of the fanbase that really wanted to have Garrus be romanceable. It was only after seeing these requests that Mass Effect 2's writers and devs decided to let fans date Garrus. That is, if you played as FemShep, you'd have to wait until Andromeda to date a female Turian, which, by the way, Vetra is very underrated. Great character. Scrapped New Game Plus joke ending. Originally, in Mass Effect 1, there was going to be a joke ending in the New Game Plus mode. In the very beginning of the game, during the mission on Eden Prime, if Shepard shot a certain part of Sovereign, it would blow up and the credits would play out. Sadly, this ending was scrapped due to deadlines being placed by EA, so the devs couldn't actually make it in time for release. Mass Effect Assignment. Assignment is a fan film released in February 2012, and unlike other fan films, is entirely interactive. Assignment plays out like a choose-your-own-adventure style game, which will result in one of 4 endings. The film is about 2 N7 soldiers, Mir and Hale, who are hunting down Willem Dafoe. Dafoe, who's a smuggler with some very valuable cargo. But they run into some trouble when mercenaries, led by an Asari Biotic, show up. Sadly, this fan film can't be experienced the way it was originally intended anymore, because YouTube got rid of the annotation system in 2019. But you could still watch it, just not the way it was intended. Reaper Queen. Originally, there was going to be a completely different ending to Mass Effect 3, where Shepard would meet the Reaper Queen. A Reaper who had been exiled and locked up in the Citadel for her belief that the cycles were bad and that the Reapers needed to find a new solution. Shepard would then be given similar choices to the Mass Effect 3 we actually got, except with one small difference. The Destroy ending here wouldn't just destroy all synthetic life, but it would also destroy the Citadel and the entirety of the Earth, like the planet would blow up. Liara's original recruitment. So Liara wasn't originally going to be recruited on the planet Therum. In fact, Therum wasn't even going to exist originally. The original plan was that Shepard and their team would travel to a planet called Kaelston. Assets created for Kaelston went on to be used in the Bring Down the Sky DLC, and concepts created for the planet would be reused in Omega in Mass Effect 2. However, that leaves one question. How was Liara going to be recruited? Well, on Kaelston, you'd find out that Liara had been kidnapped by a Solarian drug lord named Smiley. Shepard would be told about this from the administrator named Toombury. Shepard would then have to lure out Smiley's brother and capture him to get the password that would let them into Smiley's hideout. There, they'd kill Smiley and wouldn't discover Liara. As it turns out, Toombury was simply using Shepard and their crew to take out Smiley and his crew, as she saw them as competition. It turns out she's evil, and running some slave labor type stuff with the local miners' union. Shepard and crew would then decide on what to do with Toombury, and would eventually discover Liara's location. Cerberus's original role in Mass Effect 3. While Cerberus plays a pretty big role in Mass Effect 3, a lot of stuff about them was scrapped. Here's a rundown on most of the stuff we know about the scrapped Cerberus plotlines in Mass Effect 3. At one point in the game, Kai Leng was going to show up on Thesia and trick either Ashley or Kaidan into thinking that Shepard is a Cerberus agent, and responsible for the murder of a Spectre that was partnered up with either Ashley or Kaidan. A scene similar to this is still in Mass Effect 3, but originally in this scene, Kai Leng was going to pretend to be an Alliance agent, and if you weren't able to convince Ashley or Kaidan to stand down, you would have to fight them in a boss fight with Kai Leng. And after this fight, you'd have to choose to save Ashley or Kaidan, or Liara, as the temple around you collapses, like that one awesome Uncharted 4 trailer. The Cerberus coup on the Citadel was also going to play out very differently in the original Mass Effect 3. Kai Leng wouldn't have appeared at all, and instead, Adina would attempt to kill his fellow council members, only for Thane to jump in the way and take the bullet. Shepard would then gun down Udina, and after this, the Council would give Shepard command over the entire Citadel fleet. There'd also be a side mission afterwards about Shepard and company rooting out Cerberus spies in the Citadel. Also, before all of this, Thane would have given you a quest where he'd ask Shepard to locate a portable indoctrination device that was stolen by Cerberus. They'd been using it on Thane's son, but luckily he was able to resist it. Shepard would then travel to a Cerberus mansion and find the device, alongside a doctor named Dwight, who would then try to use the device on Shepard, with no effect. And finally, the original boss fight of the game was going to be the Illusive Man, who would have been Reaperized, and he would look pretty wild. This was scrapped because it would have felt out of character for the Illusive Man to fight you in combat. Also, a lot of the designs suck. Batarians working for Saren in Mass Effect 1. Batarians didn't really have the biggest role in the original Mass Effect game. In fact, they weren't even in the game until the DLC Bring Down the Sky. This wasn't always going to be the case, however. In earlier versions of Mass Effect 1's plot, the Batarians were going to be the species that worked under Saren instead of the Geth, making them one of the main antagonists of the original game. Cerberus Daily News and Alliance News Networks. Prior to the release of Mass Effect 3, BioWare launched a viral marketing campaign titled the Alliance News Networks. Alliance News Networks would report on in-universe news. This would continue even after the release of Mass Effect 3, with the campaign's Twitter account teasing and advertising the upcoming DLCs. The Alliance News Network would post on Twitter, Facebook, and the official BioWare website. But this wasn't the first time BioWare had created an in-universe news program. In Mass Effect 2, you could get access to the Cerberus Daily News. This was another in-universe news program that you actually saw in-game. And by in-game, I mean at the main menu. There'd be a bunch of different news stories on different days of the year. It was a pretty neat way of expanding the universe, except for one tiny problem. You needed to buy it. It wasn't a separate DLC, but instead, it was part of Mass Effect 2's $10 online pass. Without it, you wouldn't see any news stories pop up. Sadly, these news stories weren't included in Mass Effect Legendary Edition, but if you play it on PC, you can download a mod that sends all the news reports to Shepard's email, so it's kind of like having it back. Finally, I want to mention the Cerberus Network cards. These were cards given out with copies of Mass Effect 2 that had a code on it. You would take the code and then input it on EA's website, and boom! You got not only the Cerberus News Network, but also the Zaid DLC. Zaid's Recruitment Mission. In Mass Effect 2, Zaid just kinda like joins your crew. You don't gotta win him over or anything, he just shows up on Omega, tells you he's being paid by Cerberus to help you, and that's that. But originally, Zaid was actually going to have a recruitment quest. This mission would have seen Zaid demand 1 million credits up front before he agreed to work with Shepard. Because they don't have that amount of credits, Shepard and crew would then have to go and rob a local mafia on Omega. Then they'd pay Zaid, and then he'd join the crew. Elletania Prothean Ruin. In Mass Effect 1, you can travel to the planet Elletania and discover a very strange Prothean ruin. If you investigate it, you'll receive a vision of primitive humans hunting thousands upon thousands of years ago. This primitive human, or caveman, that you're seeing through the eyes of, encounters a Prothean data recorder, and things don't end very well for him. Sadly, there's no cutscene. This vision is done entirely via text. What's interesting is that for some reason, finding this Prothean sphere is flagged as an event when importing a save file to Mass Effect 2. However, it has no effect on Mass Effect 2's plot, so I can only assume that this is somehow related to some scrapped content. Battlefield 3 Soldier. In Mass Effect 3, you could unlock a unique character to play as in the multiplayer portion of the game. And technically, I guess you could argue that this character is a guest character? Kinda? This is the Battlefield 3 Soldier. And yes, that's the official name. In order to unlock Battlefield 3 Soldier, you need to have a Battlefield 3 save file, and boom, you unlock him instantly. The guy's armor is modeled off of the soldier from the Battlefield 3 cover, and is pretty much identical in terms of power and stats with the human soldier character. Although there is one difference between the two. Battlefield 3 Soldier has the ability Carnage instead of Concussive Shot. Cheese Wheel. In Mass Effect Andromeda, you can find a giant cheese wheel floating in space. You can find it floating in the Cyvex system, although it might not actually be a giant cheese wheel, as the game states that it's a piece of unknown alien tech. Obviously, this is a non-canon joke Easter egg, but it's still weird. The Mako got replaced with the Nomad. Originally, in Mass Effect Andromeda, the Mako was going to return as the main vehicle in the game. It actually made it into early builds of the game, with a 2014 build of the game having it playable and customizable. It was also missing its turret. I'm not sure if you could add it back, but since Andromeda doesn't have any vehicle combat, you probably couldn't. But anyways, during development, the Mako was replaced with the Nomad. Most likely because BioWare thought the Mako was too slow, and by removing its turret, you just kinda defeat the purpose of bringing it back in the first place. Mass Effect Datapad. This was an iOS app that was a way for you to check the status of Mass Effect 3's galaxy map, and receive messages from characters. You could even play a little minigame that impacted the Galaxy of War system. This minigame allowed players to deploy fleets of ships to different locations in the galaxy in order to gain credits and increase the readiness in a certain theater of the war. Though once sending out a fleet to do a mission, you can't actually use that fleet for a period of time. Mission lengths varied, but it ranged from 1 hour to an entire day. However, you could actually shorten the length of time by using upgrades, and you could use your credits to buy up to 5 fleets to use. This little game is actually still playable, just not in Mass Effect Datapad, as in June 2013, it was removed from the App Store. You can still play it on your computer on the N7HQ website. Probably the thing that this app is most well known for, though, is the fact that you could receive messages from Mass Effect characters like Liara, Miranda, Garrus, Vega, Mordin, Thane, Rex, Arya, Jacob, Samara, Cortez, Joker, and even Captain Bailey. I just love the idea of getting text messages from Rex. Like, imagine him texting. What would he talk about? Honestly, if BioWare just made an app dedicated to getting text messages from characters from Mass Effect, I think it would do weirdly well. The original Arrival DLC. Originally, the DLC mission, Arrival, was going to take place in an underwater base built by humans, instead of a Batarian outpost on an asteroid. The original plan for the mission would have had Shepard taking a submarine down to the underwater base. This entire mission would have been a reference to the film The Abyss. However, sometime in development, BioWare changed their minds, and all of the underwater stuff was scrapped. Mass Effect 3 Special Edition. Many don't actually know this, but Mass Effect 3 is, to this day, the only Mass Effect game to be released in 2 different console generations. Not counting Legendary Edition, obviously. The game was released for PC, PS3, and the Xbox 360 in March 2012. But 8 months later, in November, it was then released for the Wii U, which was the first console in the 8th generation. This version of the game was titled Mass Effect 3 Special Edition, and came with a variety of content that wasn't included with the PS3 360 PC release. It came with the story expansions Extended Cut and From Ashes, 2 weapon packs, and all of the multiplayer DLC. Also, being released for the Wii U, this allowed the game to be played using the Wii U's gamepad. The gamepad would show a map of the area you're in, along with icons for turrets, stairs, squad mates, objectives, etc. Basically, a giant mini-map in your lap. Or however you played with the gamepad. I don't know, I never bought a Wii U. Sadly for the Mass Effect fans who owned this version, it never received any of the other story DLC. And to this day, Mass Effect 3 Special Edition is the only Mass Effect game to be released on a Nintendo console. Side note, I love how the official trailer describes this version as the definitive edition. Javik's scrapped role. It seems that Javik was originally going to be part of the base game before being split off into the realm of DLC. Originally in Mass Effect 3, upon meeting Javik for the first time, Ashley or Kaidan would immediately point their guns at him and threaten to kill him. Shepard would then have to talk them down, or, if they're evil, let them kill Javik. Javik would also be introduced to the player while standing in a crater surrounded by dead Cerberus agents. Later in the game, Javik would be an essential squad mate during the Thesia questline. While there, he would communicate with Vendetta, the Prothean VI. Vendetta would then tell Javik, Shepard, and Liara that the Citadel is the catalyst. And finally, it would be revealed later in the game that Javik was actually the catalyst. He would have to sacrifice his life in order to activate the weapon to kill the Reapers, as only a Prothean could activate it. 183 pull-ups. In the Citadel DLC for Mass Effect 3, you can start doing some pull-ups in front of Vega, who then challenges Shepard to beat his record of 182 pull-ups. And yes, you could actually beat this record with 183 pull-ups. It takes roughly 14 minutes of pressing the exact same button over and over again, but yeah, you can do it. And no, there's no achievement for doing this. The only things you get are Vega being impressed with you and the occasional comment he says during the pull-ups. Cora Harper is the Illusive Man's daughter. There's a theory that Cora Harper is actually the daughter of the Illusive Man. What's the evidence for this? Well, for starters, their last names are the same, with the Illusive Man's real name being Jack Harper. Not the greatest piece of evidence, I know. Another piece of evidence is that while Cora was off training, her parents disappeared, and she was never able to find them. So could her dad been the Illusive Man and abandoned his daughter? No. Yeah, this theory was pretty popular before the release of Andromeda, but after its release, we've learned a lot more about Korra's backstory, and the Illusive Man doesn't fit into it. The Illusive Man, or Jack Harper, was a mercenary for a while. Meanwhile, Korra's father was in charge of a cargo freighter. Honestly, I think BioWare just gave her the last name Harper as a red herring to make fans speculate and theorize. Or it was just a coincidence. My personal theory is that Korra Harper is the great-great-great-great-great-great-great-granddaughter of Mike Harper. Gabby and Ken's scrapped plotline. In Mass Effect 3, Gabby and Ken were originally supposed to be recruited at the Purgatory Bar, where they'd reveal that they only served with Cerberus because of their respect for Shepard. They would then rejoin the crew of the Normandy, and all is good. However, if Gabby were to die during Mass Effect 2, only Ken would be at the bar, and he would be in the process of drinking himself to death, blaming himself for Gabby's death, and upset with himself for never telling her that he loved her. Shepard would then have to convince him not to waste his life, and then he'd join your crew. Side note, in Mass Effect 2, there were actually plans for Ken to be a romance option for FemShep, most likely on the same level as Kelly. Zaid's son. In Mass Effect Andromeda, you can find a dude named Bane Masani chilling out near Prodromus, planning on attacking some Kett targets. Ryder can then take out the targets he mentions, and Bane tells you that you did pretty well for a little duck. He's a relatively minor character, but if you've played Mass Effect 2 and 3, you'll recognize his last name as Zaid's last name. And unlike Korra Harper and the Illusive Man, this time it's not a coincidence. Bane is Zaid's son. Back in the Milky Way galaxy, he served as a private security contractor who never knew his father Zaid, though he did know that he was a big-time mercenary. Bored of his life, he joined the Andromeda Initiative. And in Andromeda, he left the Nexus during the Uprising as an exile, and he's been hunting down the Kett ever since. And that's pretty much it. Minor character, but a pretty neat connection with the main series. Cal Regar and Emily Wong in Mass Effect 3. The characters Emily Wong and Cal Regar appear in Mass Effect 2, and are mentioned in the third installment, but don't actually appear. And by mentioned, I mean it's mentioned that both of them die regardless of your decisions prior to the events of Mass Effect 3. And by mentioned in-game, I mean Regar was. Emily Wong was killed off via a Twitter promotion. Very cringe. But that wasn't always going to be the case. One of the original plans for Mass Effect 3 was that both of them were going to fully appear in the game and meet up with Shepard at some point. Emily would have had a mission where you'd escort her and another reporter into the Citadel wards to question witnesses about Cerberus' recent attack. As for Regar, he would have had a semi-prominent role helping Shepard get to the Geth consciousness. Ploba. Ploba is the third planet in the Antaeus system, and is arguably the most mysterious planet in the entire Mass Effect series. In fact, it may be the single biggest mystery in the franchise. You see, at first glance, the planet doesn't look all that special, but according to the series' lore, this planet is speculated, in universe, to be a planet-sized supercomputer. This theory stems from survey ships scanning the planet and finding massive structures hidden deep within the planet's atmosphere. Other theories suggest that the planet is actually a dumping ground for ancient aliens who dumped all their weapons onto the planet. You might be thinking now, well, okay, why doesn't anyone just travel to the planet to see for themselves? Well, they have, but nobody's ever returned, with the most recent attempt ending in the deaths of 12 people. So what could Ploba be? A dumping ground? A planet-sized supercomputer? Or just a normal planet? Hopefully, we'll get an answer someday. The Ralloy. First mentioned in the Cerberus Daily News articles in Mass Effect 2, the Ralloy are a sentient alien species in the Milky Way galaxy that we never see in the original trilogy. They were welcomed into the galaxy in 2185, but only a year later when the Reapers showed up, the Rowloi fled from the Citadel and isolated themselves on their home world, destroying all of their satellites, in hope that they'd be able to trick the Reapers into thinking that they were a pre-spaceflight civilization and to spare them and their planet. As for their appearance, they're described as being avian and having feathers. Also, during their Citadel welcoming party, they had to wear hazmat suits to avoid spreading a recent virus plaguing their world. As of right now, outside of the Cerberus Daily News article, the only time they've ever been mentioned is in the novel Andromeda Annihilation. I kind of imagine them looking like skirmishers from Halo. Mass Effect New Earth. Opening up in May 2016, Mass Effect New Earth is a 4D ride in California's Great America. It's a 4-minute long experience where riders sit down in motion seats and have a 4D experience. The plot of Mass Effect New Earth is that a civilian tourist ship, captained by Conrad Werner of all characters, flies around Terra Nova, no, not that Terra Nova, and helps destroy a Reaper with Garrus and Rex. What's interesting about this ride is that Conrad Werner is actually played in person by an actor or actress, and are actually allowed to ad-lib quite a lot. And before you ask, no, it's not canon. Pinnacle Station's cut content. So Pinnacle Station had quite a little bit cut from it. For starters, there was originally supposed to be 9 rival characters who would appear in Pinnacle Station to challenge Shepard. Their models actually appear in-game and can be found just chilling out in the lobby, but none of them are named or say anything. However, these rivals actually do have names, and you can see them on the scoreboard. And by doing some wacky coding stuff that I don't understand, people have been able to figure out which character is which. Also, by looking through the game's files, you can find 2 different NPCs that go unused. Rayla Sani, an Asari Commando, and Frey Natha, a Salarian Black Ops agent. By using some mods to force them back into the game, they don't really say anything. However, it's likely that these 2 were meant to be rivals as well. There's also some evidence in the game's code to suggest that they would have been part of some kind of story mission for Pinnacle Station. Kinda like Vinanos' quest, if you could even really call it a story quest. Vetra is Saren's daughter. So unlike the Cora Harper Elusive Man theory, this theory actually has some serious evidence. In Mass Effect Andromeda, Vetra mentions how her father abandoned her and her family, and that her dad was a Special Operations Turian agent. Vetra's mom also left her husband when her father did something horrible. It's never said exactly what he did, just that it was pretty bad. So people have theorized that Vetra's mom discovered Saren's obsession with the Reapers and fled. So is Saren Vetra's dad? It's possible, but personally, I'm not really convinced. Rachni on the Moon. In Mass Effect 1, if you explore the surface of the moon, you can actually very faintly hear Rachni singing. This means that somehow, and at some point in time, the Rachni burrowed into the moon and are currently just sitting there, waiting for something. This is probably my favorite Mass Effect Easter egg, just for how creepy it is. Mass Effect Galaxy. So I actually had no idea that this game existed before making this video. Mass Effect Galaxy was BioWare's first attempt at a Mass Effect iOS game. Released in June 2009, Galaxy is a top-down shooter that serves as a backstory for Jacob, and tells the story about how he and Miranda stopped a terrorist conspiracy against the Citadel Council. These terrorists are Batarians, and they're kidnapping human scientists to create a bioweapon to use on the Citadel. Luckily for the Galaxy, Jacob, Miranda, and their new allies are able to put a stop to their plan. This game did not get good reviews. In fact, it got really mediocre to downright bad reviews, with people saying the game's controls were clumsy, and it was just overall really boring. Also, the game's art style was heavily criticized. Like, that's supposed to be Jacob. No, it's not. Who is that? The game would eventually be taken off the App Store in 2012, so it's kinda hard to play the game now. I'm sure there's some way you can play it now, but honestly, is it worth it? Pillar of Autumn. In Mass Effect 2, towards the very end of the game, you can just barely see the wreckage of a ship on Omega that looks suspiciously like the Pillar of Autumn from the Halo series. I guess in this universe, the Pillar of Autumn didn't make it to Alpha Halo. Shepard becomes a Reaper. One of the scrapped plot lines for Mass Effect 3 was that Shepard was going to implant themselves with Reaper technology in order to fight the Reapers, as it was apparently the only way to defeat them, and this would really tick off Ashley or Kaidan, and they'd confront you about it eventually. While this was scrapped pretty early in development, concept art of Reaper-fied Shepard does exist. Faringor. Faringor is the 4th planet in the Keika system, and is a reference to the Star Wars franchise. In the planet's bio, it's mentioned that scenes from the in-universe film, Starless, were filmed on the planet. The sets for the film were preserved, and because of that, hundreds of fans of the film travel to the planet every year to visit the set. So how is this a Star Wars reference? Well, it's because the set built for the Lars homestead in Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, was actually left in the deserts of Tunisia, and fans traveled to the set for decades to visit. And in case you say, well, that doesn't mean it's a reference to Star Wars, it's just a coincidence. The official bio for the planet even calls it a backwater system, with backwater being something that Tatooine is described as being. Cosplay killed new aliens. So one complaint I actually agree with about Andromeda is that there should have been more sentient aliens. And originally, that was the plan. Early in Andromeda's production, concept artists and writers came up with up to 6 new aliens for Andromeda. However, many of them were scrapped because BioWare believed that some of the alien designs weren't, quote, cosplay safe, meaning that they would be very difficult for cosplayers to create costumes for. Design director Doran Keegan even said, quote, one of the strengths of the original Mass Effect trilogy is that you can actually cosplay most of the alien characters, except the Hanar, although I wouldn't underestimate the creativity of some cosplayers. The intention in Mass Effect Andromeda was to introduce new races that would still be in the realm of cosplay, which is probably why more crazy concepts were abandoned. This, along with BioWare only being given a budget for around 2 new species, led to the game's alien roster being pretty small. Tali's Sweat. I'm not happy about the fact that I gotta talk about this topic, but in November 2010, on the official BioWare forums, a user named Thunder Tactics created a thread where he goes into detail about what he thinks Tali's sweat smells and tastes like. And he goes really into detail, like crazy in detail. Like this dude did actual science to figure this out. He came to the conclusion that her sweat, along with the Quarian people's sweat, doesn't actually smell as bad as human sweat. This thread quickly became infamous in the Mass Effect fanbase, because of course it did. And against all odds, BioWare actually saw this thread, and they referenced it in the Citadel DLC, as while drunk, Tali can actually tell Shepard what her sweat smells like. Sweat.
It just smells like sweat. Why would you even ask that?
Normandy Crew's browser history. In Mass Effect 2, when visiting Liara, or the Shadow Broker, you can find some pretty interesting things on her computer. She's actually been monitoring the crew of the Normandy's browser and download history. Here's some of the stuff she found. Tali has been downloading videos about human courtship and mating, which is pretty funny, and videos about dealing with loss, which is not funny. Miranda purchased a book called Men Are From Omega, Women Are From Ilium, and is trying to join a group called the Diamond Circle, which I think is a dating site, and she's not really having any luck. Grunt has just been watching videos of animals fighting, which is just really funny to me. He's also been looking up facts about dinosaurs, which is just, I love it. I love Grunt. Thane is writing reports on the best ways to kill people, and there's also just, like, really sad medical stuff. Garrus has created a kill list of all the criminals he's killed on Omega, and created a music playlist that plays whenever he's in a gunfight. Mordin has created a list of all of his acting roles. He's also created a bibliography. Jack has been attempting to submit poems to Galactic Poetry Monthly, and tried to start a gambling career on Galactic Champion Poker 2100, only for her to be banned from the game 15 minutes into playing for antagonizing other players. Samara's purchased a lifetime gym membership and owns various baby and children's clothing. Weird. Also, Liara found out that she won an amateur skyball tournament at some point. Zaid left himself a note about potential properties to buy. Jacob has his own workout schedule written down, and watches some really odd movies while working out. Legion's a gamer. No, really, he just loves video games. The dude, that's all he does. That's all he does in his spare time. He just games and games and games. Kasumi writes haikus in her spare time, and Morinth doesn't have an entry, which is very lame. Alright, and that was the Mass Effect Iceberg. I hope you guys enjoyed that one. A lot of fun to make. It was a lot of fun to revisit the Mass Effect franchise, because I haven't actually played the games since Andromeda. Not when Andromeda released. I didn't play Andromeda until, like, 2020... No, probably 2020 or 2019. Anyways, I don't really have anything else to add. I mean, you guys can leave a comment below. You know, what's your favorite Mass Effect game, your favorite squad mate, your character. Did you guys like the Mako? Were you guys more of a Hammerhead fan? Personally, I think they peaked with the Nomad. I think that's the best vehicle they've done. You guys got any like theories for Mass Effect 4 or 5, or whatever you want to call it? It will be Andromeda 2. We'll have to wait and see, I guess. Next time, we'll be delving back into the superhero topics, and I'll be tackling the Iron Man iceberg. Should be fun. I've started researching it. I don't know if I'll be able to release it in April. It might have to be a May release. But there will be a video in April regardless. If I can't get it out, I'll throw something together. Because I do have other plans for content, so probably I'll just, like, throw something out that I've been planning for a while. Because there's one series I've been wanting to do, but I just haven't had the time to. It'll happen, but yeah, we'll see what happens. So yeah, that being said, hope you guys have a good one. Stay safe and all that. And I'll see you guys in the next iceberg, which will be in April or May. We'll see what happens. Have a good one, guys.